tangent, and it's hard just to keep things on track. So I just made a few notes just to keep me focused, I suppose. But yeah, I suppose where it all started for me, how I became a Christian, because I haven't always been a Christian. I actually used to be normal, believe it or not. But yeah, I found faith back when I was a young man, which is obviously not that long ago. But I found faith through an Alpha course. The penny dropped for me by doing an Alpha course back in my late 20s. Prior to that, honestly, you wouldn't have dragged me into church. I wasn't remotely interested, but I thought of Christians in general. I just thought they were a bit odd, to be honest with you. You know, people that I would just avoid at all costs. There was a lot of Christianity in my family. They were all pretty normal, but I thought they must have just been like the exception to the rule, I suppose, you know. For most of my 20s, I was in the military. I was a military policeman. And thinking back, I derived a lot of respect from the job I was doing. I don't think I realised that at the time until I left. So, you know, I was brought up in a good family, never wanted for anything, and only child, spoiled rotten, so, you know, life was really, really good. I was really blessed. Right up until life was good, so right up until I decided to leave the Air Force. And though I was doing great and probably going to get promoted in the Air Force at the time, I thought it was going to be a fab idea to leave the RAF, join the civilian police, and pursue a relationship that I was in at the time. So yeah, I was just going to live happily ever after. What could possibly go wrong? Well, no sooner than I left the Air Force, said relationship went pear-shaped. And even though I got accepted into the South Wales Police with a start date and everything, I decided it was a better idea that I was going to go and drive lorries instead. And long story short, pretty soon after I came out of the Air Force, it's quite common with people that leave the forces, the wheels just started to come off. And the wheels started to come off me, not my lorry. And I think it was a mixture of heartbreak, a lack of direction in my life, living back at home with mommy and daddy after, you know, having my independence in the forces, living away from home for so long. And I think it just sent me into a downward spiral, you know, an emotional downward spiral. And I had my first ever bouts of depression. Never experienced that up until that point in my life. And I just remember, you know, just really falling out with myself, you know, just beating myself up for all the bad choices that I felt that I'd made, you know, that stinking thinking, negativity going round and round in this flipping head of mine, and I just couldn't get away from myself, just beating myself up constantly. And again, a really long story short for the purposes of time, but it led me to one of those stop the world, I just want to get off moments. I always get emotional. And so this negative spiral culminated in me honestly, the first time I can ever remember in my entire life, just crying out to God. It's so common, isn't it? Especially with blokes, we've got to hit rock bottom before we'll look up. And for the first time in my life, I can remember just in a total emotional state, just crying out to God, just God help me, God help me. I'm sorry. And yeah, just remember being there, just snot, tears, bottle of vodka, just some sharp implements. I'm sure we can all work out what I'm saying, and just total desperation. And you know, there was no burning bush, no voice from the clouds or anything like that, but obviously, thank God I didn't do what I was intending on doing. And when I say that, I mean literally thank God. You know, because I know the mess I was in, and I still look back and it scares me, that mindset. You know what I mean? You never forget it when you've had a brush with that kind of mindset. Just when you just give up on everything, give up on yourself. And anyway, fast forward a couple of months, and taking some happy pills from the doctors, things were steadily improving for me. And then something really bonkers happened. By a random set of circumstances, oh God, one of my Christian family members dropped a DVD in for my mum and dad. And it was the first talk of the Alpha course. And the DVD read, Christianity, boring, untrue, and irrelevant. All the things I totally agreed with, right? I remember picking this DVD up, boring, untrue, irrelevant, yeah. Normally I would have just thrown it. And I thought, I don't know what, I'm just going to take that home and watch it. And anyway, I took the DVD home, put it on. I can remember just having a can of lager, chilling out. And I was expecting this guy, I was going to be totally underwhelmed. it was just going to be something that would send me off to sleep, you know. But in actual fact, I found him really captivating. And really interested and really funny as well. You know, it was an alien concept to me that a preacher could be funny and witty. You know what I mean? It was like, that really surprised me. And a lot of things that he was saying were really making sense to me. And the one thing that I remember really resonating with me was when he said about the Bible saying that God has set eternity into the hearts of men. I think it's Ecclesiastes 3:11, I think, Pastor. I should have checked. And basically what that is suggesting that there's a God-shaped gap inside each and every one of us. And it's there by divine design. It's God ordained, and all of us can, we can throw stuff into that God-shaped gap, and we often do, whether it be, for me, possessions, money, relationships, drugs, alcohol, sex, whatever, you name it. But the only thing that can truly satisfy is that relationship with God and a relationship with Jesus. And that just made so much sense to me at that time, because that couple of months prior, where I was just completely and utterly desperate, and I never had so much money in the bank. I had a lovely car. I was heavily into my athletics. I was running at a real good level, doing well in races and that kind of stuff internationally. But inside, although I was physically fit and everything looked good on the outside in my life, inwardly I was just completely wrecked. I was just hollow, just completely running on empty. And I think I just found myself for the first time in my entire life up until then contemplating, sounds a bit cheesy, a bit cliche, but the meaning of life, what's it all about? And because I've been through so much in that last couple of months, and at that point where I was suicidal, and I can remember just the point where I was crying out to God, that God help me, God help me, God help me. And yet by this crazy set of circumstances, there I was in my living room, having a beer, listening to this preacher, and it was making just so much sense to me. I can remember it was like that, God help me, God help me, God help me. And then watching this DVD, it was like there was a connection I felt. It was like as if it was meant to be, even though I'd never thought along those lines in my entire life. And I can remember getting really emotional, I watched I think I even watched it back a second time. And I can remember it was such a powerful experience, and I was really, like I said, really emotional. And at the end of it, I thought, I'm going to go and do one of these Alpha courses. Never heard of it in my entire life. Fast forward a couple of months, and there I was doing an Alpha course over in Ebenezer Church over in Abbotsbury. And I remember a combination of just being super interested, but then also having a ton of attitude about me. I remember thinking religion was just the cause of all of the world's ills, the world wars, what about all the suffering in the world, good things happening to bad people, bad things happening to good people, what about kids getting cancer, all this kind of stuff, I just couldn't wrap my head around it. But then also, at the same time, I had to be completely honest, and I was absolutely clueless about all this stuff. Before I became a Christian, I thought Pontius Pilate flew for British Airways. I was just absolutely clueless about it all. But ultimately, God is love, and you don't prove love, you experience love. And I've been very studious over the years, in some ways trying to prove all this stuff wrong, because the last thing we want to do is get brainwashed into some cult, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Believing a load of lies. And because honestly, over the years, I've dug and dug and dug, and at every event, at every juncture, Jesus just comes back with truth after truth after truth. Truth bombs galore. And what did he say? Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and God is not a man that he should lie. And I just honestly, even then, instinctively, I just knew that this stuff was true. There was things going on in my life. God was speaking to me on a daily basis. I haven't got time to go into it all, but just random circumstances, just God incidents after God incidents after God incidents. And he was just breaking me down from the inside, and so I asked him into my life. In a very, very matter-of-fact fashion, I asked Jesus just into my life. I remember thinking, I'm going to pray this salvation prayer, and if something happens, and if Jesus comes into my life and changes me, then fab. But equally, if nothing happens, then nothing ventured, nothing gained. It was that matter of fact. And I think I've missed a page for you. Give me 1 second. But yeah, I just remember just late at night on my own, just praying that prayer, just asking Jesus into my life, just, asking him to forgive me for some of the things that I'd done wrong in my life, because I really carried a really heavy burden over a lot of things. And I just said, I just promised to repent, to turn my back on the things I knew that had done me wrong, and ask him to come in and just help me live that better life. I just remember going to sleep, just a gorgeous, peaceful night's sleep. And man, I just woke up the following morning and something certainly happened. God lit me up like a firework, like an absolute firework. I prayed that sinner's prayer in my bedroom. And like I said, I was just so flipping radically different. I think for me, forgiveness was a real biggie for me at that point of salvation. Because like I said, I felt I'd done an awful lot of wrong in my life. There were some things I did, some things that I felt quite ashamed about. I'm not going to give you any details. But there was, and after praying that prayer and waking up that following morning, I just felt so peaceful, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I suppose the best way of putting it was it just felt like a shower on the inside. And it's just that new heart and a new start, isn't it? Just that born again experience, my hair never did grow back, unfortunately, but that born again experience, just that new day, isn't it? Just new opportunities, but with God on board in my life. And but I was just so radically different and super excited. I just remember thinking just the whole world needed to know about Jesus. I remember back then a lot of the world actually disagreed with me, because I was an absolute flipping lunatic. I was settled as a plane crash, But I just wanted to tell everyone I was just so super excited at what God had done for me. I felt I shouldn't have even been alive through the place I was at, and for what he did in my life. It's just never gone away from me. I just feel so grateful and so unbelievably excited, And, over the years, God's used me, quite a lot, to do quite a lot of things that I'm quite proud of. Just leading Alpha courses after I did Alpha myself, working with the homeless through a ministry called Teen Challenge, I'm sure most of you have heard of. Preaching a lot, going into prisons, absolutely love that. Something I really want to do again, God willing. And, just working on the streets, evangelism, working with youth, lots of stuff over the years. But, I got to be completely honest, even for lots of things that I've done for the Lord, there's been times when I've lost my way a bit, I've wandered off track. But even times when I've been faithless, the love of God, man, Jesus has always remained faithful. It's that unconditional love of God, isn't it? Just looking on me with his loving gaze. It's like the most gorgeous of sat-navs I've always felt, It's getting me back on track when I've gone off track, when I've got myself into some real messes over the years, even as a Christian sometimes. But in every mess, God can make it as a message, can't he? He can make it as a message, and because we all get it wrong sometimes, even as Christians. And I need to wrap it up. But what it comes down to is Jesus he's made me better, yeah. And what I mean to say is, I don't mean to say that he's made me better than anyone. He's just made me a better version of myself. I'm just so eternally thankful. He's made me more loving, definitely, 100% more forgiving. I can cut people a lot of slack that hurt me, because I've done a lot of things I'm ashamed of in my life. Most of them without Jesus, obviously. And it's just an attitude of gratitude for me as well. I just feel so lucky in life in general to know the Lord, and just so many blessings, in my life. And rather than constantly striving for things and possessions like I was for so many years. And just to finish, I'd just like to say that I'm just so determined to do the will of God in my life going forward. To try and stay super focused, because I've gone off track too many times now. And this country is in a pretty perilous state, isn't it? But I think God's on the move in this nation. And he's certainly not done with this country. And I don't know, I've never had more conversations than I've been having recently about Jesus. The tide is really turning in this country, and it's really, really super excited. Obviously all it is about is just lifting up that name, and it is. If we lift up the name of Jesus, then he will draw all men unto himself, and what he's, at the end of the day, folks, if he can do it for me, from where I was at, and my attitude towards Jesus, Christianity, everything, and to have brought me all these years like this, and left and backwards and sideways, and still walking with him, and still just super excited. I feel so privileged, but I also feel so privileged being part of this church as well. And I'm so excited. I love my church family, and I'm so excited about what he's doing with us, and he's going to do with us going forward. So God bless you. Thank you so much for listening.